My name is Elena Rodriguez, and 6 months ago I thought I understood what family meant. I'm 28, the owner of what used to be a successful restaurant chain in Phoenix. And until my mother called the police to have me arrested for stealing from my own business, I believed that success was something to be celebrated, not confiscated. The moment those handcuffs threatened to click around my wrists while my stepbrother Marcus smirked behind my mother's shoulder, I realized that some families don't support your dreams, they harvest them. It started when I was 16, working at my grandmother's food truck after school. Abuela Rosa had been serving authentic Mexican street food from a converted van for 20 years, parking outside construction sites across Phoenix. Her carne asada was legendary, but the business barely supported her. I loved everything about that truck. The sizzle of meat on the grill, the way customers' faces lit up when they saw us, the pride in Abuela's voice when someone complimented her recipes. But I also saw the missed opportunities. The inconsistent locations, the lack of marketing, the cash-only system that limited growth. Abuela, I said one afternoon as we cleaned the grill, what if we could serve more people? Multiple trucks, better locations, maybe even a permanent restaurant. She laughed with the tired wisdom of someone who'd spent decades making do. Mija, dreams are beautiful, but dreams don't pay rent. I was 17 when my mother married Richard Martinez, bringing his son Marcus into our family. Marcus was 21, charming in the way people who've never faced consequences tend to be, and completely uninterested in anything requiring actual work. He dropped out of college twice, spent 6 months finding himself in Costa Rica on Richard's dime, and spoke confidently about entrepreneurial vision while living rent-free. My mother, Sandra, had been a single parent since my father died when I was 8. She'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and Richard's financial stability represented security she'd never had. She began seeing Marcus not as her stepson, but as the successful child she'd always wanted. Marcus has such good business instincts, she would say after he'd pitched half-baked schemes requiring upfront investment but no labor from him. He sees the big picture. The big picture was always someone else doing the work while Marcus took credit for the vision. I spent senior year developing a real business plan for expanding Abuela's operation. I researched permits, studied successful food truck franchises, calculated startup costs. When I graduated, instead of going to college immediately, I asked Abuela if I could invest my college savings into modernizing her business. "You want to put your education money into an old woman's taco truck?" she asked, incredulous. "I want to put it into learning how to build something real," I corrected. "College will still be there. This opportunity might not be." We started small. New equipment, a point-of-sale system accepting cards, social media marketing, and regular locations so customers knew where to find us. Within 6 months, daily revenue had tripled. Within a year we had a waiting list of locations wanting us. I proposed expansion. 2 additional trucks with carefully planned routes and specialized menus. Abuela would oversee the original truck and train new staff. I would handle operations, marketing, and business development. We secured a small business loan, bought 2 used trucks and spent 3 months retrofitting them. I worked 18-hour days learning every aspect: cooking, inventory management, staff scheduling, health department regulations. By my 20th birthday, Rosa's authentic Mexican food had 3 trucks serving different areas of Phoenix. The success was immediate. Food bloggers discovered us. Local news featured our authentic family recipes with modern business savvy. Revenue grew from hundreds to several $1,000s daily across all trucks. That's when my family started paying attention. "Elena's doing really well with the food truck thing," my mother mentioned to Richard. "Maybe Marcus could get involved, bring some fresh perspective." Fresh perspective. Marcus had never worked in food service, knew nothing about restaurant operations, and spoke Spanish badly enough that our Latino customers found it offensive. But he had opinions about branding and leveraging our success for maximum growth potential. "You need to think bigger," Marcus told me during unsolicited consultations. "Food trucks are small time. You should be looking at brick-and-mortar locations, franchising opportunities." He wasn't wrong about thinking bigger. I'd been planning the next phase for months. But Marcus's version involved him taking over strategic planning while I continued handling operations. Essentially, him getting credit for vision while I did actual work. "I appreciate the input," I told him diplomatically, "but I've got expansion plans handled." Marcus's expression shifted, the charming smile taking on an edge. Elena, you've done great work getting this started, but you need people with real business experience. Real business experience. From someone whose longest employment had been a 4-month internship at his father's insurance office, which he'd quit because the hours were too restrictive. During family gatherings, Marcus would hold court about our family business and his plans for taking it to the next level. He always spoke as if he were already involved in decision-making, as if my role was implementation rather than leadership. By my 22nd birthday, we'd expanded to 5 trucks and opened our first brick-and-mortar location. Rosa's Authentic Mexican Food was featured in Phoenix magazine as one of the city's most promising small businesses. The restaurant had a 2-week waiting list for weekends. "This is incredible, Elena," my mother said during the grand opening. Marcus's ideas about expansion were really smart. Marcus's ideas. Ideas I'd been developing and implementing for 2 years while he offered commentary from the sidelines. "Actually, Mom, these were my plans," I said gently. "Of course, Mija," she interrupted, "but family input makes a business strong. Marcus really helped you think it through." Family input. As if Marcus's occasional suggestions carried the same weight as my years of 18-hour days, my financial investment, my relationships with suppliers and customers. Marcus began introducing himself to business contacts as Elena's business partner. He started attending industry events without invitation, representing himself as a key decision-maker. When business journals wanted interviews about our success, Marcus made sure he was included and quoted extensively about our family's entrepreneurial journey. The first direct challenge came when we were considering major expansion. 3 new restaurants in Tucson and Flagstaff. The investment was substantial and I'd been working with banks and investors for months. "Elena," Richard said during family dinner, "Marcus has some concerns about this expansion plan." Concerns. Marcus, who'd never been responsible for a business decision in his life, had concerns about my carefully researched growth strategy. "The timeline is too aggressive," Marcus said, pulling out prepared documents. "The capital requirements are unrealistic. Elena's letting ambition override sound business judgment." My ambition. The same ambition that had built our success from a single food truck to a thriving restaurant group. The conversation continued for 2 hours, with Marcus presenting every possible obstacle while I explained mitigation strategies. By the end, my mother and Richard were convinced that Marcus's cautious approach was more responsible than my aggressive growth plans. "Maybe you should consider bringing Marcus in as an official partner," my mother suggested. "2 heads are better than 1. Official partner. Someone who would have equal say despite never having invested time, money, or effort into building the company." The pressure intensified over summer. Every family gathering included discussions about Marcus's partnership. Richard began mentioning how proud he was of what the kids had built together. My mother started referring to Elena and Marcus's restaurants. When I was offered the opportunity to appear on a national television show about young entrepreneurs, my mother's response was immediate. "This is perfect for both of you. You and Marcus can represent the business together." "Mom, they specifically asked for me. It's about my entrepreneurial journey. But Marcus is part of that journey now. It would look strange if he wasn't included." I did the interview alone, explaining how I'd built Rosa's Authentic Mexican Food through hard work, strategic planning, and reinvestment of profits. When it aired, I was proud to see Abuela's story getting national attention. Marcus was furious. "That interview made it look like you built this whole business yourself," he confronted me. "You completely erased the family's contribution." The family's contribution. Abuela's recipes and work ethic, yes. My mother's moral support occasionally. Marcus's opinions about things he'd never done. "I built this business with Abuela," I said. "Everyone else has been supportive, but the work was ours." "That's not how family businesses work," Marcus shot back. "Success is shared. Everyone benefits, everyone gets credit. Everyone benefits, everyone gets credit. But not everyone does the work or takes the risks." That conversation marked the beginning of an all-out campaign to force me into partnership with Marcus. My mother and Richard tag-teamed me with guilt trips about family loyalty. Marcus began showing up at restaurant locations, introducing himself to staff as the co-owner, and making decisions about scheduling. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in October. I arrived at our flagship restaurant to find Marcus in my office, going through financial records with my accountant. "What's going on here?" I asked. "Marcus is reviewing quarterly reports," my accountant explained, looking uncomfortable. "He said you'd asked him to take over financial oversight." "Financial oversight? Of my business, my investment, my 6 years of work." "I need to speak with Marcus privately," I said. After my accountant left, I turned to Marcus with as much patience as I could muster. "You can't just show up and start making decisions about my business." "Our business," Marcus corrected. "And someone needs to be making responsible decisions around here." "Our business." The assumption that had been building for months finally stated openly. "This is my business, Marcus. I built it, I own it, I run it." Marcus leaned back in my chair with a smile that made my skin crawl. "Actually, Elena, I think you need to check your facts." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were legal documents that made my blood freeze. Incorporation papers listing Marcus Martinez as co-founder and equal partner. Bank signature cards adding him as authorized signatory. Loan documents naming him as co-borrower. "What is this?" I whispered. "This is the legal reality of our family business," Marcus said. "While you've been focused on operations, I've been handling legal and financial structure. Having connections makes certain things easier to arrange." Connections. Richard's insurance contacts, his relationship with our family banker, his ability to present Marcus as a legitimate business partner to people who'd never met me. "These documents are fraudulent," I said, my voice shaking. "I never signed anything making you a partner." Marcus's smile widened. "Check the signatures, Elena. Everything's perfectly legal." I stared at the documents, recognizing my signature on papers I'd never seen. Then I realized what had happened. The stack of insurance updates and bank forms that Richard had asked me to sign over the past year. Paperwork I'd trusted him to handle while I focused on running the restaurants. "You forged these," I said. "I facilitated them," Marcus corrected. "Big difference. And now that our partnership is properly documented, we need to discuss operational changes." "Get out," I said quietly. "Elena, this is as much my office as yours now. Get out." I screamed loud enough that several employees came running. Marcus left, but not before making his position clear. "This isn't over, Elena. Family means compromise." I spent the rest of the day with my attorney, Elizabeth Santos, reviewing the fraudulent documents. The legal situation was complex. While the signatures had clearly been forged, proving that in court would be expensive and time-consuming. Meanwhile, Marcus could use the documents to interfere with operations. "There's another issue," Elizabeth warned. "If Marcus presents these documents to your banks or investors, it could create serious problems with your credit lines." That evening, I met with Abuela to explain what was happening. She listened in silence as I described the forged documents, Marcus's claims of partnership, the potential destruction of everything we'd built. "Mija," she said finally, "what does your heart tell you to do?" My heart told me to fight to protect what we'd created. But my head worried about the cost of that fight. "I don't know, Abuela. If I fight this, we might lose everything anyway." She was quiet for a long moment, looking at the original food truck parked in her driveway. "Elena," she said, "your grandfather built our family's first restaurant with his bare hands. During the Depression, men came who said they owned it, had papers that proved it. He fought them in court for 3 years. What happened? He lost the restaurant. But he kept his recipes, his reputation, and his knowledge. 6 months later, he opened a new place that was twice as successful. Those men got the building, but they couldn't run a restaurant. It failed within a year." Her meaning was clear. Marcus could steal the legal structure of my business, but he couldn't steal the skills and knowledge that had made it successful. The final confrontation came on a Friday morning. I arrived at the flagship restaurant to find Marcus behind the host station, greeting customers and directing staff like he owned the place. "Elena," he called cheerfully. "Perfect timing. I've been implementing some operational improvements we discussed." The dining room was chaos. Servers looked confused, the kitchen was backed up, customers were waiting longer than usual for tables. "What did you do?" I asked. "Optimized our systems," Marcus replied proudly. "New scheduling protocols, updated inventory management, revised menu pricing. Small changes that'll add up to big improvements. Small changes. He'd rearranged everything that worked and replaced it with systems he'd read about but never tested. "If you're my equal partner," I said loud enough for customers and staff to hear, "then you can handle the lunch rush yourself. I'll be in the office handling paperwork." I walked to my office and made a series of phone calls. First to Elizabeth, my attorney. Then to Miguel Santos, a trusted restaurant manager who'd been wanting to start his own place. Finally to landlords of 3 prime locations that had been courting us. Through my window I could see Marcus trying to manage lunch service. He was in over his head within minutes. Customers complaining about wait times, servers asking questions he couldn't answer, kitchen staff ignoring his contradictory instructions. By 2 p.m. 2 customers had walked out without paying, the kitchen had run out of 3 menu items, and Marcus was hiding in the storage room overwhelmed. That's when my mother and Richard arrived, summoned by Marcus's panicked call. "Elena," my mother said, marching into my office, "you need to help Marcus. This is no time for family politics." Family politics. As if Marcus's theft of my business was a minor squabble rather than actual fraud. "I'm not part of restaurant operations anymore," I said calmly. "Marcus made it clear that he's handling things now." "Don't be ridiculous," Richard snapped. "You can't just abandon the business because you're having a disagreement. I'm trusting my equal partner to handle the responsibilities he claimed he was ready for." By closing time, the restaurant had lost money for the first time in 3 years. Marcus had managed to alienate servers, confuse kitchen staff, and serve customers food that didn't match their orders. Over the next week, Marcus's attempts to run the restaurants resulted in inventory shortages, staff resignations and customer complaints. Revenue dropped 40% as word spread that service had declined dramatically. "You have to step back in," Richard demanded during an emergency family meeting. "Marcus is learning, but he needs time." "If Marcus needs time to learn, he should start with his own restaurant," I suggested. That's when my mother made the accusation that would change everything. "You're sabotaging the business," she said, voice shaking with anger. "You're deliberately letting things fail to make Marcus look bad. I'm watching the business partner you forced on me demonstrate why partnerships require mutual competence." "You're being selfish," my mother continued. "This business belongs to the whole family, not just you." "Actually, Mom," I said, standing up, "I think it's time we clarified exactly who this business belongs to." I walked to my office safe and retrieved a folder I'd been preparing for weeks. Inside were the real ownership documents. Original incorporation papers, loan agreements with my signature and no one else's, trademark registrations, licensing agreements. "These are the actual legal documents for Rosa's Authentic Mexican Food," I said, spreading them across the table. My family stared at the papers, their confidence wavering. "Marcus's documents are forgeries," I continued. "Fraud, actually. And I've been documenting his use of them to steal control of my business." "You can't prove those signatures were forged," Richard said. "Actually, I can," I replied. "My attorney has expert analysis showing the signatures were traced from legitimate documents. We also have testimony from bank employees about unusual requests that didn't match normal procedures." Marcus's face had gone pale. "Elena, we can work this out. Family shouldn't fight about business." "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "Marcus will stop representing himself as an owner. He'll return any keys or documents he obtained fraudulently. And he'll sign acknowledgement that he has no ownership interest in Rosa's Authentic Mexican Food." "And if he doesn't?" my mother asked. "Then I file criminal charges for fraud and identity theft. I also sue for damages caused by his interference." "You're really going to destroy your own family over money?" my mother asked. "I'm going to protect what I built from people who think they can take it without earning it," I corrected. That's when my mother made the decision that would end our relationship permanently. Instead of accepting that Marcus's claims were fraudulent, she decided to escalate. "If you won't be reasonable," she said, pulling out her phone, "then we'll let the authorities sort this out." She dialed 911 while staring at me with cold determination. "I need to report a theft in progress," she told the dispatcher. "My daughter is stealing from the family business." I watched in amazement as my own mother described me as a criminal to the police. She told them I was illegally excluding legitimate business partners and hiding assets from co-owners. She's here right now, my mother concluded, stealing documents and trying to change bank account access. 20 minutes later, 2 Phoenix police officers arrived. My mother met them at the door, her performance of concerned family member convincing and well-rehearsed. "Officers, thank you for coming so quickly," she said, leading them to where I was sitting with the real ownership documents spread across my desk. "Ma'am, we received a report about theft from a family business," the first officer said. "Can you explain what's happening?" Before I could respond, my mother jumped in with her version. According to her story, Marcus and I were equal partners, but I was trying to steal his share by hiding documents and changing bank access. "She's always been jealous of Marcus," my mother told the officers. "Now she's using the business as a weapon against him." The officers listened politely, then turned to me. "Miss, what's your response to these allegations?" I looked at my mother, at Marcus hovering behind her with guilt and hope, at Richard filming the confrontation like he was documenting evidence. "Officers," I said calmly, "I'm the sole owner of this business. I have documentation proving that. What you're witnessing is a family attempt to steal my company using forged documents." I handed over the real ownership papers, expert analysis of the forged signatures, and Elizabeth's legal brief documenting the fraud Marcus had committed. The officers spent 20 minutes reviewing documents and asking questions. It quickly became clear that this wasn't a simple family dispute. This was attempted theft using fraudulent paperwork. "Ma'am," the first officer finally said to my mother, "based on the documentation provided, it appears your daughter is the legitimate owner of this business. The documents your son has been using appear to be falsified." My mother's confident expression crumbled. "That's impossible. Marcus has been involved in this business from the beginning." "According to these records," the officer continued, "Miss Rodriguez has been the sole owner and operator for 6 years. Your son's claims of partnership appear to be fraudulent." That's when my mother made her final desperate play. "She's lying," my mother screamed, pointing at me like I was a stranger. "She's stealing from the family business. Marcus is the rightful owner. Arrest her." The desperation in her voice was painful to hear. This woman who'd raised me was now demanding my arrest to protect her stepson's theft of my life's work. I handed over my keys with a smile. I said to the officers, pulling the restaurant keys from my pocket and setting them on the desk. "If my family believes Marcus is the rightful owner, he's welcome to try running the business." "Miss Rodriguez," the second officer said, "are you voluntarily relinquishing access to the business?" "I'm allowing my family to discover what happens when someone who's never run a restaurant tries to operate 5 of them," I replied. What happened next was exactly what I'd expected. Within 30 minutes of my departure, Elizabeth arrived with 2 associates, a court stenographer, and enough legal documentation to fill a briefcase. "Mrs. Martinez," Elizabeth addressed my mother formally, "you've just forced the rightful owner of these businesses to surrender access based on fraudulent documents. Your son is now attempting to operate restaurants he doesn't legally own, using systems he doesn't understand." The legal implications hit my family like an avalanche. Not only had Marcus committed fraud with the forged documents, but my mother had now used those fraudulent documents to force me out of my own business. "We can work this out," Richard said, his voice shaking as he realized their legal exposure. "This is just a family misunderstanding." "This stopped being a family misunderstanding when you called the police to have me arrested for protecting my own business," I replied. Elizabeth spread her own documents across the table. Lawsuits for fraud, interference with business operations, and defamation. Cease and desist orders preventing Marcus from representing himself as a business owner. Asset protection orders securing my accounts and properties. Your son has 72 hours to return all materials related to these businesses and sign acknowledgments that he has no ownership interest, Elizabeth told my family. After that, we proceed with criminal and civil litigation. The room fell silent except for the sound of Marcus crying. Not tears of remorse, but tears of someone who just realized his theft hadn't worked. 3 days later, Marcus returned all forged documents, signed the acknowledgments, and agreed to never represent himself as having any connection to my businesses. My mother and Richard hired their own attorney, but the evidence of fraud was overwhelming. 6 months later, the legal issues have been resolved, but the family relationships are permanently damaged. My mother still believes I was selfish for refusing to share my success with Marcus. Richard maintains that I destroyed the family by choosing money over loyalty. They don't understand that this was never about money. It was about the principle that success belongs to the people who earn it, not the people who claim it. It was about refusing to let anyone steal 6 years of my life because they thought they deserved the results without doing the work. Rosa's authentic Mexican food is more successful than ever. Without Marcus's interference, we've completed the expansion into Tucson and Flagstaff. The national television appearance led to franchise opportunities across the Southwest. Abuela and I opened a culinary school where we teach both traditional Mexican cooking and modern restaurant management. Marcus never started his own restaurant. Last I heard, he was selling insurance for his father, still talking about entrepreneurial ideas, but never implementing them. My mother sends birthday cards with notes about how she hopes we can put this behind us and rebuild our family relationship. She still doesn't understand that families aren't rebuilt by ignoring theft. They're rebuilt by acknowledging it and making amends. The handcuffs she demanded for my wrists never materialized, but the truth did. Sometimes the best thing your family can do for you is show you exactly who they are so you can decide exactly who you want to be. I chose to be someone who builds rather than steals, who earns rather than claims, who protects what matters rather than surrendering it for false peace. The keys I handed over that day were returned within hours, but I kept something more valuable: the knowledge that my success was real, earned, and mine to protect. And no one, not even family, will ever take that away again.